start, but so just for whoever watches this on Zoom or on YouTube later, we're having technical problems, so we're not able to get the Zoom live right now, interactive, but this will be watchable on YouTube later. That's going to shorten my introduction a little bit. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Cookie, if we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Narita?
Here.
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Here.
Commissioner Chair Robbins?
Here.
Vice Chair Rowinski?
Here.
And Commissioner Michaels.
Great, and I'd like to welcome Commissioner Riddlemeyer. This is your first meeting, so welcome. Thank you for joining us. First item of business is the consent calendar. I don't get to go through the button pushing for Zoom, so we'll just move on. And this is the meeting minutes from the November 9th meeting. It's been a while. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll move approval.
I'll second approval.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. That's done. Now we're at public comment, and this is public comment on items that are not on the agenda, and these are not items that we can act upon, but if there's anybody in the public that would like to speak, do we have any yellow slips?
No, I do not.
All right. Going once, going twice. Okay, we will close the public comment period and get on to new business. And this is the year in review 2022 of Public Works. And we're going to get an update, and we will have an opportunity for questions, but there's no request for particular feedback to go up to the council or anything. So it's pretty much the director's show and the staff. Please.
Well, thank you very much, Azalea Mitch, Public Works Director. Happy New Year. It's nice to see you all, and congratulations. As you may remember, we started this process a little bit over a year ago in the process of giving you the year in review. What has Public Works been up to over the past year? We were expecting to do this in December, but because of a few changes and cancellations, we are doing it in February. I'd like to introduce, since then, however, starting in December, we have a brand new Deputy Director, Evan Albert, joined us. He's been with us for the last 6 weeks, and he's still here, which is great. And Matt Fabry, he has been our second Deputy Director for now a year and a half, Matt? Roughly so, and you will see how he is now providing great oversight over quite a few divisions and the Clean Water Program. We have a lot of slides for you. So it is a dense presentation. We'll go quickly so that we can allow for ample time for questions and answers. Let's make sure. There we go. So on the agenda is the overview update of from our two separate large groups, which consist of a number of divisions. We would like to give you an update on how the year ended and started in terms of wet weather, and then the next steps for the department. As you all know, we are the stewards of the infrastructure, many miles of streets, sewers, everything that's underground, everything that is above ground, as well as dams, a large lagoon, our levee system, and our 24/7 wastewater treatment plant. Our budget, we are, even though the 2022-23 capital improvement budget is larger than typical at 68 million, a large component of that is our clean water program. And our operating budget is around $38 million a year. We are now 150 of us, so we operate quite a few different divisions. As I shared, we have 2 deputies, and even though the department is not necessarily split in half, each deputy is responsible for 4 different divisions. And we also have a business services division as well as our executive assistant team. And they are always challenged to make sure that these meetings run well. So we're very appreciative of them, even though sometimes we run into issues. So I will give you an overview of each of the divisions as well as what we do and what we have accomplished over the last year. One of our largest divisions is the Capital Improvement Program. This is a group of engineers. We have an engineering manager as well as 3 senior engineers, associate and assistant engineers. They are responsible for planning, designing, and building all the improvements and new assets of our infrastructure. And our typical CIP budget is around, and this is a typical number, this excludes the clean water program, 15 million, and we have 14 full-time employees. We run the Smooth Streets Pavement Management Program. We have a group of inspectors. They make sure that the construction is done well. We're also responsible for bridges, our Trained Quiet Zone program. We receive a lot of service requests, so we have staff dedicated to addressing those. And then we have our utility, our stormwater program, as well as someone who helps us oversee how we're tracking budget-wise, and then that person oversees our inspection on the private development side. So I will highlight a few of the more significant efforts. Our pavement management program, as I think you all are very aware of, this is our largest asset, over 200 miles. And we have different types of rehabilitation. We seal the cracks, we slurry seal, then we grind and pave, and then when the streets have failed, we have to reconstruct them. This is our current, the way our current network looks. We track the condition of our streets by using a pavement condition index, a PCI. And if that PCI is over 70, we're in great shape, very good. If it's over 50, we are good. If it's under 50, we now see a poor condition, and below 25 is failed. So we currently have the Smooth Streets program, and we're in design for the last phase, which is the last 5 miles of that program. And it's actually the most challenging phase because we're dealing with areas of very poor soil. So the reconstruction is a little bit more challenging, and we're actually using different methods. So as I shared, we have 200 miles. We recently completed rehabilitation of 2.6. We are catching up on our slurry seal. We actually did 17 miles. That's 10% of the roadway system. And we reconstructed 1.6. And that was a total of $11 million. So moving on to train horn noise, a huge issue with quality, impact of quality of life here, a lot for our transit-oriented development areas. Anyone, and you can actually hear the horns from even if you're not within the half-a-mile radius. But our council members over the past quite a few years have even flown to Washington, D.C. to learn more about how we can designate our city as a quiet zone. As a quiet zone. So we've been working on this steadily, and so what that means, the issue that we have is because in San Mateo County we have the most at-grade crossings. The trains have to, They have to turn on their horns, and there's a safety issue associated with at-grade crossings. So we've been working on safety improvements as well as separating some of our crossings. Last year, we completed 25th Avenue, and then we created 2 brand-new underground crossings at 28th and 31st. So as a follow-up to this effort are the improvements on 4th and 5th. Those improvements consist of installing more gates, quadrant gates, to improve the safety features on these crossings. So we are we completed the design last year, and at the beginning of this year, put that project out to bid. So the plan for that project is to complete it this year. Caltrain has their improvements in their right-of-way. The goal is to complete both efforts, for them to complete their effort and ours this year. We are currently evaluating the next project to actually qualify for a quiet zone, and that's assessing what to do at the crossings at Villa Terra and East Bellevue to actually qualify. And that assessment will include either closing one of them or doing some more extensive safety improvements. So we are in the process of evaluating the options there. But the goal is to then, once 4th and 5th are completed, once we know the next steps on one or both of these crossings, for us to complete the improvements and then put in the paperwork to actually qualify for that quiet zone the following year. So on to bridges. These are our projects that have kept us very busy. You're familiar with the Bermuda Bridge. We have quite a few bridges in the city. This bridge needs to be replaced. It is seismically unfit. So we're in the process of designing. This is the only way to get into the bridge that goes over the Fiesta Channel, and it's the only bridge that residents actually have to get in and out of their neighborhood. So we're currently in the process of wrapping up the design so that we can begin construction the following year. We've been working with the community to figure out the outreach process and what needs to be done to provide people with access to their homes. And then this is a very significant project for us as well, the North Shoreview Flood Improvement Project. As you all may know, there's a significant area in the city that is in the flood zone, and those flood zones keep getting extended. So we've been focusing on improvements to 2 of our existing stormwater pump stations, and also increasing the height of 2 of the levee segments. So we're actually making very good progress. We're almost done with this project, and the next step will be for us to file that paperwork to FEMA so we can actually remove the 1,600 homes out of the flood zone. So we are anticipating to physically complete this project in the next 2 months. Then it will be up to FEMA. That review process will take quite a few months for us to actually successfully remove properties from the flood zone. I think in November we presented on Green Fleet. So just as we updated you, we are transitioning our fleet based on market availability. We're decommissioning the compressed natural gas facility at the treatment plant, and we're actually started to have meetings with Peninsula Clean Energy to take a look at the programs that they have to help us actually develop a transition plan. So we've been very busy. We actually placed an order for an electric truck, and every time we purchase a vehicle, we actually assess whether there is an electric version on the market. And then the other effort that we are actually wrapping up is a 15-year sidewalk repair program. As you may know, sidewalks, even though they're in the public right-of-way, per state law, are the responsibility of the property owner. I know that often creates a lot of concern and anxiety. It is the state law. What we do in Public Works, if there is a tripping hazard, we actually do a repair, and it's intended to be a temporary repair. We notify the homeowner that hazard needs to be addressed permanently. However, 15 years ago, council did make the decision to create a 15-year program to actually work with certain communities and replace poor sidewalks. We are down to the last funding available, and what we have done is we've actually have used those funds more efficiently by saw cutting. Instead of actually replacing sidewalk segments, we actually go in and shave if we can structurally and remove that hazard, which has saved us a lot more money, and we can actually address many more deficiencies rather than replacing the whole segment. And as we are the stewards of the infrastructure, you can imagine the number of calls we receive, whether it's street lights, traffic signals, sewer issues, storm issues, potholes, you name it. Anything that's in the public right-of-way, both above and below ground, we are responsible for the maintenance and improvement on those assets. And we do receive around 3,600 emails a year to our Public Works email, about 200 to 300 calls a week, and everything gets logged into our asset management system that issues a work order to our crews. And on the capital side, we handle those service requests by one of our engineers, who then takes a look at the sidewalk conditions, roadway deficiencies, and other improvements that require engineering rather than just maintenance. So we can be reached by phone, email, we have an online form, and we also have an app. In terms of our upcoming projects, we have our Smooth Streets. We are on track on the design side and construction. That program will be completed in 2026. Our pavement management program, that is in perpetuity. We slurry seal and grind and overlay every year. We're very, very excited to construct the improvements at 4th and 5th and to actually achieve that quiet zone designation. And then we have been patiently waiting for the landscape improvements at 82 and 92, and that we are stuck with Caltrans on agreements there. That was CIP. All right, I will go faster because Matt is waiting for me. All right, so on the transportation side, we actually have an engineering manager who is responsible for private development, transportation, and all the permitting in our public right-of-way. We have a senior engineer who oversees traffic engineering and operations, our neighborhood traffic calming program, and some CIP, such as our high voltage streetlight program. On the private development side, we have a senior engineer who manages all the permitting, encroachment permits, small cells, and also private development reviews. And then we have a principal transportation planner whom we work really well in engineering and planning to really look at transportation policy, parking operations, and also how we convert our streets into, multimodal rather than vehicle-centric. So our private development group has not stopped in terms of the planning applications. We've been sort of breaking records. Just this last year, they reviewed 162 applications, over 1,000 permits, over 1,200 encroachment permits, and then small cell applications, wireless communications. So on the transportation side, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this group because it's a small group and it's a big city. And we have 200 miles of roads used in many different ways. And so our role in transportation engineering is to not only take a look at the planning piece in terms of how are we using our streets now, but how should we use them in the future? What is the functional design? How can we improve operations? And then plan for improvements to provide safety and also make our streets more sustainable. So we plan, design, we manage for all modes. And our traffic engineering group, one of the things that you will hear from us is that even though as a department there are 150 of us, there are divisions that do a lot with just a few staff, right? So our traffic engineering group is a strong group of 4. We have a senior engineer, an associate engineer, an assistant, and an engineering tech. They manage everything from how our traffic signal simulations, they actually do some modeling, they optimize, they look at modernizing, timing, and all so that we can relieve congestion. They take a look at our collision data. Anytime there's a request for stop signs, they have to do an assessment to figure out if the vehicle volume is there to actually whether it warrants the installation of stop signs. They're continuously doing speed limits and studies to assess, how fast are people driving. They're responsible for our traffic calming program, our action plans, requirements that we have to develop studies like our local roadway safety study, and also developing standards for our street lights. They're also responsible for capital improvement projects, such as working on grade separations. We've been very busy applying for grants. We now, even though we did not receive funding through RAISE, we did submit for 2 other grants, and we're waiting to see if we can get planning and design money for the downtown crossings. They have also been very busy working on the 101 Peninsula Interchange project, doing the design and implementation for the school speed zones project, and then bicycle pedestrian improvements. And we are trying to do quite the job here to make sure that we coordinate internally. When we have a pavement project, we take a look at the bicycle network. We take a look at pedestrian improvements so that we are comprehensive and don't do things in a piecemeal fashion. There's also a lot of coordination with our private development group in terms of reviewing when a development submits a planning application. There are quite a few steps, and one of the steps is their traffic impact analysis. So we review those and comment. We've been very busy working with community development on the general plan, specifically the circulation element. And we also have to make sure that the speed limits that are posted are enforceable. I don't know if we presented to council last month on where we are with our engineering surveys for all of the street segments. And also then there's the master planning, developing a traffic signal master plan. We're currently working on complete streets. We will present to you next month the outreach proposal for that big effort. And then our hope this year is to receive funding for a downtown circulation study, given the vision for downtown. So you can see that this is a lot for a very, very small group. On the planning side, our team manages the parking supply, pricing, improvements on our downtown garages, our permit programs, and we're also working on policies on transportation demand, safe routes to school, as well as working with commute.org on shuttles. This group was responsible for spearheading the bicycle master plan effort a few years ago. And so we work on figuring out where we have opportunities when we are resurfacing our roads. As you all were involved, we successfully completed the traffic-oriented development action plan. So that plan highlighted all the improvements that need to, that will improve safety on the path of travel within half a mile of, public transit. So the next phase of that plan is to figure out how we can fund it. So we will be busy working on that. And then ongoing coordination with private development. So one of the questions that we have been, we answer often is, how are our traffic action plans doing? And I will remind you all that our council has many, many priorities, and they go through this process every year, the Blue Sky session. So one of their top priorities is, and I will read this, implement traffic programs and improvements to enhance safety for all users by utilizing public input and data, such as the input that led to the traffic action plans, to improve safety on neighborhood roadways and intersections. So this is our priority, to balance, right, data with public input. And we have 14 traffic action plans. Even though neighborhoods were able to give us their top 10, those top 10 are actually involve quite a few different actions. And we have a total of 292. 234 have actually been completed. What is left are the efforts that are much more expensive and infrastructure heavy. So we are looking at those projects that amount to over $1 million that are basically left. So we are in the process of reassessing those actions by looking at what does our data tell us. And as you may be aware, about 3 years ago, we started this I think it's an impressive effort with police, where we track collisions, and we track them based on injury, whether pedestrians were involved, whether cyclists were involved. And so we actually have this data online. It's available. It's part of our effort to be as transparent as possible. You can see the heat maps. We have grouped collisions, yellow, number of collisions over the last 3 years, 20 to 70. Those you can see on the left in yellow, red 15, blue 1 to 3. And what this information allows us to do is to really figure out, because we have no dedicated funding for these, everything comes from the general fund. So what we have to do is prioritize and figure out where that effort should go. And so we are trying to balance the last remaining actions from the TAPs with the data so that we can assess, where are the collisions happening. And as you can see from the heat map, we have, challenges in downtown along El Camino and Hillsdale. So one of the TAPS projects, is redesigning the signal at Alameda de las Pulgas and Hillsdale. So we are currently in design, and the goal is to allocate funding so that we can actually build those improvements in the next few years. So that, the benefits here to improve operations, pedestrian safety, and the lighting. We've also been busy really taking a look at our corridors, 19th Avenue, Fashion Island being pretty critical, and that's an area that sees a lot of congestion. So we are, not only are we looking at, I'll take a step back a little bit, right? We receive a lot of requests that are very neighborhood focused with respect to cut through traffic. We have the TAPs. We also have congestion challenges. So we need to figure out, right, how to balance this and where to focus our improvements. And the corridors are, on the congestion relief, they're rather challenging because there are a lot of other agencies that we need to coordinate on 19th Avenue corridor. So we are in the process of doing we completed actually the assessment that then will lead to the design to address vehicle congestion during specifically the peak hours for this area. And then on the bicycle front, this is another big project that we're very happy to actually have funding for because we received a nice grant. This is the Safe Routes to School corridor, building a protected bike lane on Delaware from Pacific to 19th Avenue. So we completed last year the preliminary engineering and planning, and this year we will be working on the design. And so this focuses on bicycle safety and also the goal of reducing vehicle emissions. And you will hear a lot more about our Complete Streets Plan next at the next commission meeting. This is a big effort. The Complete Streets Plan, the goal of it is to bring many of our plans together and to propose a vision for the public right-of-way that allows for just multimodal use. And one of the biggest challenges that we have is that the public right-of-way is, there's only so much right-of-way that we have. There's the circulation element there in terms of moving vehicles through. There's a safety component associated with bicycling. There are parking demands, and there's also a desire to make our pedestrian realm friendlier and wider. So we will embark on a pretty extensive and comprehensive public outreach process to assess, from the community what vision, should our streets have, depending on where we are, whether it's downtown, on the residential front, or other commercial fronts, so that we can focus on all the different benefits of having streets that are, in essence, right, more complete, not just vehicle-centric. So we await your comments on that process. All right, so on to regulatory compliance. This is also our busy group that deals with our environmental inspections, permitting, you name it, air, water, solid waste, and all the pretreatment, so that we don't get toxic things in our sewage. So they are responsible for, and this is something that Matt Fabry did in his past life. He needs to forget about it. But he led he was incredibly helpful in his past role with CCAG on making sure that we understood and implemented the Stormwater Municipal Regional Permit. So, but he's on to sewage now. So, but on the stormwater front, we have to comply. Our stormwater system needs to comply to make sure that what ends up in the bay through our storm system is of decent water quality. So they are responsible for our MRP. We've also been very busy on finding funding for our stormwater system, and we kicked off a Clean Creeks and Flood Control Initiative last year. They assist us on the permitting for our wastewater and air district issues as well. We have an air district permit for the plant, as well as all of our standby generators. And they also inspect and enforce all of the commercial and industrial activities. We presented to council last year on the solid waste rates. We will be going back to council this year for another annual increase. The big effort here is to really have our rates, were required by law to make sure that they reflect the cost of service. And that means that certain accounts will see an increase while some of them won't, because they're not balanced in terms of what it costs to provide services. So we had a successful conversation with council last year, and we will be returning to council this year for the annual increase. This group also manages the composting. As you all know, we have now a requirement to compost, and so they've been very busy working with all property owners to make sure that this program is well understood. And they have a lot of activities throughout the year, such as the Bayfront cleanup and then managing e-waste and shredding. You will also, we've presented to you all a few times on our stormwater effort, right? The stormwater system is, we don't have dedicated funding for this, unlike our sewer system. There are a lot of challenges associated with that as it relates just to managing the lagoon itself, which is our storage facility. The water quality challenges there in terms of goose control, for example. But on the stormwater front, we do have significant unmet needs as it relates to capacity, addressing constraints in the system, and of course the $80 million challenge for dredging the lagoon. So we don't have a dedicated funding source. We did survey the community last year. The support for a stormwater fee was, we didn't get the support that we were looking for in terms of actually following through with the ballot initiative, but we will be working with the community again on a tracker survey, and the hope is to be able to have an educational outreach effort to see if we can actually get the support to have dedicated funding. All right, last but not least, we are in council chambers, and every public facility is managed by our division that not only manages facilities, but also fleet. And we have a group of 9. They are responsible for maintaining, making sure things are clean, making sure they work, and for also assessing things that need to, that really require more of a capital improvement. So we have 11 parking lots and garages, 32 public buildings. They're also responsible for the assets on parks, such as, when those lights in parks do not work, it's our facilities group who's responsible for making sure that they're fixed, and then also for replacing and maintaining our 198 vehicles. In terms of projects, we have a big project right now, City Hall space planning. For us in Public Works, we are next door. It's actually rather expensive, so we're looking to see if we can actually move back to City Hall. And so that would require quite a few changes to the building, so we're currently working with an architect to help us assess if we can make that move happen. We've been very successful with the Marina Branch Library. We actually just received $1.5 million supported by Senator Feinstein, earmarked funding for that. We received $500,000 from the state library, and also 1.3 from the state surplus. So we have a few $1 million to make sure that library is. Right now, the floor is failing, the foundation is failing, so we will be replacing the foundation and doing other improvements so that the community can have basically a safe building for them to use. And then we've been remodeling City Hall restrooms, doing work at the Yard, the King Center in Joinville, and we're currently just completed designs for 3 different restroom parks: Indian Springs, Fiesta Meadows, and Casanova. And with that, I will pass it on to Matt Fabry.
Thanks, Azalea. So that's, see if I can get this to stay fixed. That's half the department, and that was a lot, and I promise that my slides will go more quickly. And partially that's because 2 of the divisions that I manage are very important, but they are more of the divisions that are doing sort of the ongoing day-to-day stuff that isn't some of the exciting projects that Azalea talked about with some of the other divisions. So one of the groups that I manage is our field maintenance division. So these are the crews that work out of the Corp Yard. And we have sort of 2 halves to that. We've got the sewer side of things, and then we've got the streets and traffic divisions. And so There's about 38 staff total that are in this division. And so we've got crews that deal with operating and maintaining our sanitary sewer system, and so that includes all of the underground pipes. We also have a bunch of sanitary sewer pump stations. We have storm pump stations, so we've got a pump crew that manages those. We've got our Marina Lagoon that has these very large, you can see the picture there of very large pumps that we have 5 of those out there at the Marina Lagoon pump station that help manage the lagoon. And we've got miles and miles of sewers and storm drains and trash racks and filters and things that have to be maintained and kept clean to keep things flowing. So these groups are out there every day doing preventive maintenance on these facilities, doing corrective maintenance when things go wrong, and we've got staff that are on call 24/7 if they need to get called out. We've got a lot of stuff above ground as well, where we've got sort of the streets and traffic side of things, and these folks are dealing with repairing potholes. They do some, smaller pavement improvement projects in terms of repaving. If it's, smaller scale, our crews can do it. If it's larger, then it goes to the CIP group as part of the programs Azalea talked about. We've got all the sidewalks that we do some of those trip hazard repairs. We've got 87 intersections that are signalized, and so our crews have to make sure that all of those signals at those intersections remain functional for obvious safety reasons. And then we've got over 7,000 streetlights that are a frequent call out to go out and repair those. And all those have to also be inspected and checked on a regular basis to make sure everything's working. So this just gives you a sense of some of the top 20 field maintenance tasks that we track in our asset management and service request type system. So the biggest thing is cleaning main lines. So that's our sewer crew, and that's, as Zelia said, we do have dedicated sewer revenue for our sewer system, and so that does allow us to have an active ongoing preventive maintenance program for the sewer system. Not so on the storm side of things, as Zelia said, so that's a little bit different, but we also do a lot of debris pickup. We have a lot of problems with people dumping, and ultimately, eventually, Public Works gets called if nobody ever picks it up, and so our streets crew does spend a lot of time doing debris pickup. So this gives you sort of a sense of all the things we do. We do thousands of different tasks every year, spread out through all these different groups. So that's sort of the field maintenance. It's a large group, important stuff, but it's all sort of ongoing preventive and corrective maintenance kind of things. They aren't doing some of the bigger projects. We've got the wastewater treatment plant where I've got a similar number of staff, where we've got 31 staff out at the treatment plant. We've got sort of 2 main divisions, operations and maintenance, and then we've got a smaller laboratory division that does all of the sampling and testing out there to make sure we're staying in compliance with our regulatory requirements. The maintenance side of things is making sure that all of our instrumentation and pumps and valves and everything continues to work out there, and does our asset management program out at the plant. As you can imagine, the treatment plant has thousands of different assets that have to be tracked in terms of the maintenance that needs to happen, and when things get done, we got to track that we've done that. And then the operations side of it is really the folks that are operating the plant and doing all the stuff that treats our wastewater. And this is a facility that operates 24/7, 365. It never shuts off. We've always got wastewater coming into the plant. It's very important in terms of protecting public health, and as Azalea said, we're also protecting the bay with our discharge. We do pump all of our treated wastewater out into the San Francisco Bay right underneath the San Mateo Bridge. So we have to make sure that we're meeting all of the regulatory standards to protect aquatic life in the bay. So it's a big operation. I also manage a small division that is, like Azalea said, a small group but does a lot of great stuff. So this is the data management division. So they manage our asset management program for everything that isn't at the treatment plant, and so all of the preventive maintenance things that have to happen on our pump stations and our sewer lines and streets and things like that get managed through this group. They also manage our GIS system in terms of mapping. They process all of the underground service alerts that come in. So when somebody wants to dig, and do something in the underground, they call USA. We get notified, and we have to send our crews out there to mark our utilities to make sure that our utilities don't get damaged. And so they do all of our mapping and data support for the Public Works Department. So they manage a lot of service requests. We get about 3,000 service requests a year from the public and other entities that we enter into our system, and dispatches our crews out to deal with it. we have about 32,000 task activities recorded, and we do about 18,000 USA tickets a year. So it's a big effort to go out, and we don't have to actually go out to all of those, but it's a big effort to review all those, make sure we do have to go out and then mark our utilities to keep those safe. So then the last group that I manage is the Clean Water Program, which is a small group of city staff, but then we also have very significant consultant support on this program. So we've got an engineering manager and a couple of staff that work on some of our projects. We do both sort of collection system capital improvements, and then we've got the treatment plant capital improvements. And we've got consultant support that sort of really is doing the bulk of all the Clean Water Program efforts in terms of project management and construction management, all the environmental and permitting activities, a lot of the public outreach things that we do. So on this slide, you've seen this probably 100 times by now, probably, but this is the Clean Water Program. Just it's the refresher is the nearly $1 billion 10-year effort. A lot of the projects that are on here have already been completed, which is great. We're focused on wet weather management and providing upgrades and capacity improvements to handle flow during wet weather events so that we don't have sanitary sewer overflows. So we're doing both collection system improvements as well as we're doing a brand new treatment plant, and that's intended to both provide additional capacity for wet weather flows, but also provide enhanced nutrient removal to help. We're sort of an early adopter of new technologies to help protect the bay in terms of nutrients. So we do annual rehabilitation of the sewer pipelines, and so we split our system into 5 different basins, and each year we evaluate and address defects in one of those basins, so the entire system gets addressed every 5 years. So we really basically go out and we clean all of the lines, and then we video those. We look at what defects we find from the video investigation, determine which ones rise to the threshold of needing to be repaired, and then we work with consultants to help design the proper fixes, whether that's doing some sort of pipeless or trenchless repair, or if we have to open cut and repair those, and then we contract those out every year in terms of getting those fixed. So it's a big effort, but I think we're starting to see results from this, and we did have a period of 6 months prior to I think it was the first 6 months of 2022 where we didn't have any sanitary sewer overflows, which is a big deal in terms of how many sanitary sewer overflows we have had in the past. And so I think we're starting to see the benefits of all the investments that we're doing in our system, as well as our proactive preventive maintenance activities. So I'll just show some images of the 2 big projects that we're doing under the Clean Water Program, which one is the Underground Flow Equalization System, or UFES. This is the big 5 million gallon underground tank at the event center. So these pictures sort of show the progression over the year, sort of starting from when we were still just digging a big hole, to the upper right is showing when they were pouring all of the floor for the facility, and then the bottom right is showing where we are roughly today in terms of they've got all the walls poured, and they've started putting in all the columns that will support the roof, and they're actually, I was out there yesterday, and they've got all the false work in place to start actually pouring the roof. So we should have a roof on there pretty soon. So these are some additional pictures just showing on the left where we were at the start of the year and where we are at the end of the year. So we expect to be done. This project also includes significant sewer work in Delaware, where we're putting in micro-tunneling, a new diversion sewer so that we can send excess flows over to this facility. And so we expect to be done with all of the chaos in Delaware by the end of April, which will be a huge milestone. We've really impacted the public for a significant period of time with our work on Delaware and Saratoga. And then we expect to have the UFES facility up and functional in time for next rainy season starting in the fall. So that will be great to have that in place for next year. And then lastly, I'll just cover the treatment plant upgrade and expansion. This is our biggest project, which overall is over $500 million for this project. And we're about 60% of the way done on that at this point, which is great. This project was contracted in sort of 3 phases. We're done with phases 1 and 2, which was really sort of excavating and site preparation and then doing the foundation for the facility. And so now we're very deep into building the facility. We've done about 95% of our 32,000 cubic yards of concrete. It's a huge amount of concrete that's been poured. We're sort of going to be shifting away from concrete by the end of this month, I think, and then moving heavily into electrical, mechanical, and process instrumentation portion of the work. So that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of cool stuff happening out there. This will just be a series of pictures from the 4 cameras that we have out there that are linked to our Clean Water Program website. So I'll just sort of show where things were at the start and at the end of the year. So this is our administration building. You just sort of see the structure of it there at the beginning of the year. The building is sort of fully enclosed on the outside now. You can't really see all the work that's happened on the inside, but there's been a significant amount of work on the inside where they've got sheetrock up in our bathrooms and all kinds of stuff on the inside. And the solar panels on the roof. Yeah, you can see the solar panels on the roof, so it will be a LEED facility, so we're looking forward to that. These are sort of the treatment areas at the start of the year where you can see they were just sort of pouring had all the basement or the floors poured and we're working on the walls, and then this is where things are now. We've got something that looks a lot more like a treatment plant. We've got our large equipment building for our membrane filtration system on the right side, and then our biological nutrient removal treatment areas there in the center of the photo. This is the headwork, so this is where the flow comes into the plant. It's a pretty complicated set of concrete pours that they had to do on this section, so this is what it looked like at the beginning, and then this is the way it looked at the end of the year. So these areas here are sort of the channels where water or wastewater is going to flow through and go through our screening and coarse screening and then fine screening before it gets into the actual treatment areas. So this is going to be a huge improvement over our existing treatment plant where we don't have the traditional headworks in terms of screening and grit removal and things like that. So it's going to be a big improvement over what we're doing with our current plant. And then this is looking sort of at where our main electrical building is. That's what the structure is there that's underway. But you can see at the beginning of the year, we still had just a whole lot of piles that had been put into the ground. I think we installed over 1,900 piles for the whole project. And then at the end of the year, you can see here what it looks like. Those are our 4 very large emergency generators that will provide standby power if we lose power there. The electrical building, and then you can see again in the background the large equipment building for the membrane filtration. So, and I think that is it, and I'll turn it back to Azalea.
Thank you, Matt. So we did want to take this opportunity to give you an update on how the year ended. So as I mentioned earlier, the city, land-wise, is 12 square miles. We have 7 major watersheds, and 2/3 of the city actually drains into the Marina Lagoon. The Marina Lagoon is a storage facility. It is a controlled structure, which means it is dammed, and the only way to get water out of that is during wet weather events, is for that water to be pumped out. So we start the wet weather preparation work actually in October, and we have quite a few preventive, even though we do routine preventive maintenance, we go into a much more busy mode in wet weather because we have to make sure everything is operational, and especially the 10 stormwater pump stations that will have to be ready when the rain falls. And we also remove leaves and debris. We open up public sandbag stations, and then before an event, we actually ask staff to sign up for standby so that they can be called in if the event turns out to be larger than anticipated. So on New Year's Eve, we were expecting 0.95 of an inch in San Mateo. So we receive reports from the National Weather Service every day. I take a look at these, staff take a look at these. We also have a system where we have gauges throughout the city, and based on the rainfall forecast, we see what the projected rainfall is expected to be for the city. So unfortunately, those forecasts for us were off. While we were expecting an event that was to bring 0.95 of an inch. We actually saw 4 to 5 inches. And a lot of water came down in the early morning hours, and by 8 a.m. we had flooding throughout the city. These are pictures that Matt and I took that day. Our staff, we had to call our, and of course this was, Saturday. It was, we had to call our staff, folks that had signed up to be on standby. We had 42nd Avenue flood. This is a pump station that got submerged, and so the motor stopped working. So we were very busy in the morning blocking that off. We had flooding. That's a picture of B Street, and those businesses actually were impacted by San Mateo Creek. So after New Year's, we were expecting a much larger, significant storm, and so the city opened up. We had the Emergency Operations Center open up. Our city manager proclaimed a local emergency. We went into heavy planning mode. We actually knowing the areas that might flood. We had staff actually drop off barriers in case, the areas did flood, that we could barricade them and block off traffic as soon as possible. We set up City Hall as an evacuation site and temporary shelter. We brought down the levels in the Marina Lagoon even further. We asked staff to come in for the treatment plant, and we did something that we had not done. So our crews work from 7 to 3:30, and we actually asked them to split their shifts. They worked 2 12-hour shifts so that we could cover the night. And then we also set up a public works dispatch. So typically during the off hours, our calls go to our police dispatch, and they call the folks on standby. So, but on New Year's Eve, they were overwhelmed and received 1,300 calls. So we actually asked staff to answer the phones through the night. So, and they logged every call and communicated with the crews. We actually also had our park staff help our crews. So we had 4 park staff work during the day and through the night to help our crews address quite a few fallen trees and areas that did flood. We were very fortunate during New Year's Eve actually not to be impacted by electrical outages. And so we were very lucky on that front. We issued over 500 tons of sand and 15,000 bags. We were also coordinating with the San Francisco Utilities Commission. San Mateo Creek is the watershed for Crystal Springs Reservoir. And over that period, the reservoir increased by 10 feet, the water level by 10 feet. So there was a concern about it overtopping, so water going over the spillway. And during that time, we were in the process of working with our hydraulic modelers to figure out if the spillway, if water were to go over the spillway, then what the downstream impacts would be. And we were able to identify areas that would need to be alerted and potentially evacuated. Luckily that didn't happen, but we did keep the community on alert, and we were working with SFPUC to make sure that they continue to release into San Mateo Creek to bring the water level down. These are just a few pictures of the sandbag station at the Corporation Yard. These are pictures of trees, quite a few fallen trees throughout the city. And we have to continuously make sure that our trash racks, what you see on the left is a video of our staff going in and removing things like tires and bricks and concrete blocks to make sure that these racks keep flowing and that trash is actually removed and doesn't flow downstream. These are pictures of San Mateo Creek, where we actually ended up going in and removing trees that had fallen in and vegetation. And then we also kept our flood prep website up to date and let folks know. We actually did receive a lot of volunteers who adopted drains, so that was really wonderful to see. And we were also fortunate enough that the rain events on January 4th and the 9th were not as had been predicted. So what are the next steps for Public Works? So this Saturday, we have the Blue Sky session. So we currently have over, I think it's 40-something priorities for Public Works. We will see what our new council wants to see as part of that effort. And it is an in-person event at the College of San Mateo. So we're expecting it to be a full day, and it's in person. We've also been very busy on our budget planning. So we actually begin this process in November. So we've been identifying, working with our teams to see where we are on completing designs, what's going to require money for construction, and then to see what monies are available for us to actually make that construction happening. We have a lot of public engagement ahead of us in that we will be coming back to you on complete streets, Bermuda Bridge, the stormwater fee. We've been very busy also working in our community development block grant area. And this area includes the neighborhoods of North Central and North Shoreview. We actually just awarded a project to repair 4,800 sidewalk tripping hazards in this area. And this is one area of the city that actually has dedicated funding. We receive around $300,000 to $400,000 a year, and we've been using that money to address pedestrian safety issues as well as bicycle projects. We will go back to the North Central community. Last year, we installed bicycle lanes. We did receive a lot of feedback through that process. We have survey findings to see what the community would like to do in terms of parking. So we've been working on analyzing that data, as well as we completed the assessment post-project of the parking needs, and we will be returning with that information. We also are in the process of completing the 101 Peninsula environmental review process, and we are starting a benefit cost assessment to figure out if that project is fundable. And we are fortunate that we now, we're actually trying to recruit for a part-time Safe Routes to School coordinator. We received funding for this last year, and so we will be working on schools. And then in terms of public engagement, we're in the process of figuring out how we can share with the community what Public Works does and what it takes to maintain and improve the infrastructure. And on the stormwater front, so there was, we've been focusing on working with a consultant to reconstruct the storm event over New Year's Eve. We are in the process of scoping out pump and engine condition assessments. This is our largest pump station. And so we are in the process, while we've been rehabilitating the actual pumps, these are diesel engines, and they are old. So we are looking to see how these can be assessed. We're continuing to coordinate with the SFPUC on how we can better manage the San Mateo Creek watershed. And so they are very open to working with us on a larger assessment so that they have the ability to actually increase the releases, and so that we're not in a situation like we were over the last few weeks in terms of having that reservoir spill. We are continuing the effort on the stormwater fee. This is a pretty significant initiative because our stormwater system has no funding. And as part of the capital budget process, we will be requesting funding to reassess the volume that we have in the Marina Lagoon. It has been filling with sediment over many years. This storm brought in a lot more sediment, so we have to do a bathymetric assessment to figure out how much storage capacity we actually have. And so we've been, so we'll be requesting funding for that, as well as our hydraulic models for our creeks. And we are hoping to really take a look at how we can best monitor our creeks and actually provide information and live data to our residents. You know, where I live, I can look online and see what the level in my nearby creek is. And so we're hoping to actually develop a monitoring program, as well as many of the stormwater system improvements that were identified in the 2004 Storm Drain Master Plan that needs to be updated. So we really appreciate your time, and I know that you have a lot of questions, so we will stop talking.
Azalea, Matt, thank you very much. That was excellent. One question, Cookie, do we have any public comment, any slips or anything?
No, I have none.
We don't. Okay, so normally, and for the newer members of the commission, we would have questions from the commission and then have public comment and then come back with further comment. I think tonight, given the fact that the Zoom isn't there, so nobody can come in that way, we should just feel free to mix your questions and your comments at the same time. And if you miss something and want to come back on a second wave, I'm happy to do it. And what I'd like to do is start at one end, Commissioner Michael, and then we'll work our way around.
Thank you. I think that deserves a round of applause of all the work that the city does, and thank you for going through it so efficiently. I just have clarifying questions, maybe just because I'm less familiar with the programs, but the train quiet zone, are you trying to get federal compliance to get into a quiet zone? So does that mean through San Mateo there would be no horns sounded at any time?
Except at the stations,
So at the stations, but not like through
through the corridor.
not
Right.
through the corridor, but at the stations.
Yes.
And do you have a timeline of when you think we'll get there?
So indeed, so the once we complete the assessment at Villaterra and Bellevue, we will then look at what if one of those crossings will need to likely be closed, and so we'll have to engage the community, do a circulation assessment, and then work on the design. So we're hoping to use this year for that. The assessment is almost done, which will inform the design, which will then lead to the outreach. And so the hope here is sometime next year to actually be physically done with the improvements to then get that clearance.
Excellent, thank you. I learned a lot in this presentation. One more question about the Marina Lagoon. You mentioned it's a storage capacity. Is that storage for wastewater or storage for stormwater?
It's part of our stormwater system. So
Stormwater
all the 2/3 of the city's drainage. So we have the 16th Avenue channel, 19th. We have Laurel Creek. All those watersheds drain into the lagoon.
Got it. And then you said it's controlled, so then it's controlled to pump stations take it out to the bay.
We have at the end, we have the Marina Lagoon pump station, and we have 5 pumps that pump that water over into the bay.
Thanks for explaining that. And no comments, just great job.
Commissioner Rowinski?
Sure. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on Commissioner Michael's question on the Marina Lagoon. So my question is, the underground flow equalization system, if that was in place, could that offload the Marina Lagoon, the volume at the Marina Lagoon, or are they totally separate systems?
So they are technically separate systems that coexist. So UFIS is, so when it rains, there's stormwater that enters our sewage system, sewer system. And so that combination so it's really stormwater entering.
Through the sewer system?
And UFIS will give us 5 million gallons of storage capacity so that we during the 5-year, 6-hour storm, so that we eliminate sanitary sewer overflows.
Right.
So 2 different systems. What we see in terms of stormwater really depends on rainfall, but it impacts the carrying capacity of our sewer system.
Right,
So
okay.
what it will do is prevent overflows that then will allow our streets to carry more stormwater. So because diluted sewage won't be, we will
Won't be on the
reduce
streets.
on the
Yeah,
streets.
we noticed we had some SOSs on
Delaware.
Delaware, yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay, so they're two separate systems. They deal with stormwater. Basically, Marina Lagoon is the creeks and the underground flow equalization system is the stormwater that enters in through the myriad of the miles of sewer pipes.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's how that works. Okay, thank you. Let's see, other questions I had. A question I have is related to street signs and street lights throughout the city. How does the city manage them when they need to be repaired? For example, when I see street signs faded, I send an email to Cookie. Now, now, that's not the way we probably want to manage.
Who does that?
Right. You know, so so that's probably not a way to manage our faded street signs, nor our street lights that go out. A couple of times I've sent Jay an email letting him know that residents have told me about this going out. So how do we manage that? Like, for example, I remember Matt Zuka talking about the fact that on street signs, there was going to be an inventory and a scanning system, so they would be replaced on a certain periodic basis. Yeah.
Yes, so we do have our sign inventory program. And so we have our preventive maintenance, we have to replace our signs by a certain number of years. And so they are on a schedule to be replaced. So that will happen automatically.
Right.
Because we have that system in place. However, if a sign is damaged, the best thing to do is to actually email our public works at cityofsanmateo.org, because that email is managed by our administrative assistant group, and they put in a work order. So that is the fastest, most direct way to get a service request in.
Right, right. So there's some sort of damage, be it the sun or a car or something, whatever happened. Graffiti comes to my
Exactly.
mind. Yeah, we have
Yes.
graffiti and all of that. But okay, so we do have an inventory system now in place, and that the signs are replaced on a periodic basis, but in between, we have to reach out to Public Works.
Yes,
Okay.
and so the either a phone call or an email
Right.
that is managed by Cookie's group, and that goes directly to our crews.
Okay, all righty. Another question I have relates to the trash racks and filters. What is the status of the large capture systems? I know that's mandated by law. It's very important to capture this trash from Laurel Creek, all these tributaries that feed into the bay, actually feed into Lagoon, which then goes into the bay. So what is the status on that?
We have the requirement to meet 100% trash capture. So we actually we bid this project for the Poplar Creek Golf Course. We're installing a few large trash capture devices there. And then we have smaller systems that we have to install to then meet the 100%. So we're on track to meeting that 100% mandate.
Yeah, and that is important, you know, and that might warrant a review with the SIC sometime in the future. Yeah. I just want to mention a comment here. You know, the 19th Avenue Fashion Island study, and I know about Fashion Island and talking to those people there, but I do want to bring to your attention that potentially there's going to be a very large development going in. Okay, so you know about that. That could really materially change any results, and I don't know if it makes sense to hold off or do a portion of what's being planned and then, all of that? Okay.
Absolutely. So the intent is with this assessment to take a look at the impacts of that development. We do have money that was contributed by a different development for improvements at one of the intersections. But we really want to make sure that we take a look at the corridor as a whole to improve, really focus on congestion relief and also on safe mode of travel for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Right, yeah.
So, but indeed, we've actually have met with a few of the residents and are very much aware of the
Of the
development
potential,
and
the
potential
development out there.
impacts.
All right. And one last question on our streetlights. How does the city, and once again, we have, I think I saw 7,000, if I'm correct, streetlights throughout the city. How does the city manage those if a light goes out, or it's knocked down, or it's ill-timed? All of those issues, as opposed to, like, I've contacted Jay a couple times on this email, which is not effective.
So, because we have so many of them,
Right.
we actually, and we have one traffic and lighting technician and one traffic safety worker. We basically have a staff of 2 who manage the street lights, and then we have another traffic safety worker who manages signs. We actually do want your emails, and we do want your phone calls. We need residents who can let us know if there's an outage, because we just don't have the ability to know when
So there's
certain
no
lights
like
go out.
electronic sensors?
I can get back to you on that, but I'm not aware
Okay,
of
yeah, I mean, you
anything
would know
that-
if there's electronic sensors in these, and there's not. And that might be something, I don't know how other cities, how does a city like New York City manage its streetlights? I mean, 7,000 streetlights is a lot of lights. And there's got to be some sort of censoring mechanism exists, and maybe that's something we could look into in the future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Riddlemeyer.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. That was wonderful. It was great to have on my first night here to really get me on board here. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to be succinct. First, I wanted to know a little bit more about this watershed study that you mentioned on San Mateo Creek and SFPUC. What does that look like? What's the timeline? And also, you mentioned that there are 7 watersheds in San Mateo, but this study only has to do with one of them, San Mateo Creek. What would be the possibility of expanding that to the other watersheds, especially the ones where we know that there are flooding problems, like Laurel Creek, and given the future that we know that we're going to have, probably more creeks than just the ones that flooded this winter?
Absolutely. So we are proposing, in terms of next steps, to update our storm drain master plan, which was developed in 2004. And that is just dated. And as you noted, we are going to see much more extreme events. So we are in the process of figuring out what it will take in terms of updating the hydraulic model and then running through different scenarios. So we're hoping to do that for all of the city. The reason why I highlighted San Mateo Creek specifically is because there's a partnership opportunity there with SFPUC. And they are very interested in working with us to increase the releases during non-rainy days so that we're not in a situation like we were on New Year's Eve. And right now they've been limiting their releases because there is concern of flooding. So the watershed study, we actually just had a meeting on figuring out what they've done with other agencies, and they shared some sample scopes, but it would be a hydraulic assessment. We do have homes and properties right along the creek that are in the flood zone, so it would be trying to figure out what can be done. The first is hydraulically, right? We need to resurvey We need to update those models. We need to make sure that we know the depth of the creek at certain releases, and that we also know, based on rainfall prediction, how much flow that watershed downstream of the dam actually contributes. So that's the nature of the watershed study, is really a hydraulic assessment, and it would be a similar scope to the rest of the watersheds. The difference here is that we have the discharge from the reservoir is limited because of potential flooding concerns. And we also have other agencies like we have El Camino, so that creek goes underneath El Camino and also underneath 101. So our hope is to also engage Caltrans in this effort. But it would be, that partnership with SFPUC. But the intent is to analyze the entire city.
And what's the timeline?
If we get funding, so we're proposing to, we're requesting funding through the Capital Improvement Program budget. So for fiscal year 23-24.
So I'll be looking forward to learning more about that. I'm wondering about you mentioned a lot of data management that the city has, and part of this goes into your question about the inventory, the street sign inventory and other complaints that people have regularly. The city has this data. Is this publicly available?
We are, yes, it is. Everything that we do, is publicly available. We have a system managed by our data management group, Cartograph. That's the asset management system that our staff uses to log work orders. This is focused on field maintenance. So our crews that are in our right-of-way doing preventive maintenance and also answering requests like a street light is out. All that gets logged, and absolutely all the, so it's requests as well as what we do routinely as part of our preventive maintenance effort.
So if somebody has complained and they don't see anything happening, how can they check up on it?
Oh, so this is what we are actually, this is what we need to do, and we're actually trying to figure out with our software, Cartograph, if there is a public-facing feature that we can have a dashboard for exactly that reason. So we, there are some, just expensive licensing challenges there, but we are in the process of evaluating what options we actually have to make sure that information, so that we can make it available to the public. Yeah.
Okay. So other data that you might more easily have publicly available is your GIS data. Is that something that
it is, and that is, it is on our website. So you can actually take a look at parcels. You can take a look at our utilities. So it is on our website.
Okay. So one more data-related question. You had a great map of injuries, the hot spots where there have been car collisions and injuries. And you mentioned that was from 2020 to 2023. As far as traffic goes, that time period is really different from what came before it and where we are now, 2020, 2021, obviously, because people were working from home mostly. So how often is that updated? Because I'd really like to see what 2022, 2023 looks like as opposed to 2020 and 2021.
Well, this is actually, the images I have are as of today. Mm-hmm. So that captures data from the effort with police started in 2020. So they uploaded, it was a big lift to actually create the dashboard and to make that interactive and to categorize the type of collision so that you can actually go in and specify the time frame, but we have data from 2020 through 2023, and it will continue, that database will continue to grow.
Okay, so it updates, it's a live
Yeah, it's an
site.
active program, okay. And so, yes, what I showed you is as of this morning.
Okay, great. So one last question for now. You mentioned that there are 11 public parking lots that the city runs. Where are those?
Downtown.
They're all downtown? So, okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Narita.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and really appreciate it. And thank you, Azalea, Matt, and welcome, Evan. So I have some questions that I'll try to thematically break down, and you know me, I have a lot of questions. So on the topic of thank you so much for giving that update on wet weather. I was curious if that was gonna come in the presentation since it kind of happened in that weird in-between beginning of 2023. I was curious what reflections you all have starting, in the planning for the next wet weather season and whatnot, given that, especially when it comes to just resilience planning. Resilience is obviously a theme that will cut across all the planning that the Public Works does, but are there any highlights that you'd want the public to know about, how that experience will change what you're planning for in 2023 that you'd like to give a preview for right now?
So a few things. We are, what we experienced was riverine, right? It was our creeks really exceeding, their capacities were exceeded. We understand from the latest science that rainfall events will see, I think we'll see 37, the latest study for the area is 37% more rainfall. And so that 100-year event will change. I think
It'll be like every 3 years.
Exactly. And so I think part of the update to our storm drain master plan will need to take into account, right, the fact that 100-year event, our pipes are not designed. They're designed for the 10-year event. Part of it is educational. Just because the street is flooded, it does not mean that water is getting conveyed, right? And so the challenge is that while our pipes are designed for the 10-year event, our streets carry that flow. And so I think part of it is that understanding of when it rains, what can happen, especially during a significant event, that those streets will flood, but that water will get conveyed. We have bottlenecks, and I think we saw a lot of flooding in other areas because we do have culverts that are not sized for the 100-year event. So I think that one is the understanding how the function of our streets when it rains and when we do have flooding. We do not have funding to replace culverts, for example, or pipes to address those bottlenecks. We don't. We have a 2004 master plan, and no projects have been implemented for that long. So part of the stormwater fee effort is to try to see if there is support this year for dedicated funding. And then the other piece, so that's when it rains. The other piece that we're hoping to start tackling is just adaptation planning as it relates to the 3-mile levee system that we have. Sea level rise, the projections are changing rapidly, so we have to make sure that our levees continue to be FEMA certified and that we figure out how we can keep up with sea level rise. So that's another effort that we're hoping to do, and as well understand the impacts of groundwater rise as well.
Thank you. Along the lines of resilience, I was curious, for instance, specifically around the materials that are used for street paving. Like, do we use the most porous materials that could help with that sort of thing, or does that not help us in San Mateo? I was curious about that, for instance.
Absolutely. So pervious pavement is not designed for vehicles, so for traffic flow. So it can be used on parking lots where you're just, the low speeds, but they're not designed to hold actually, cars traveling. So it is not suitable for our travel lanes, for example, and it's twice more expensive. You also have to be very careful with where you're designing, because in areas with high groundwater, it can actually make the situation worse.
Yeah.
So you want that water in pipes so that it actually flows to the bay. So there's some engineering that's required. We have to know the groundwater levels, and there are limitations in terms of actual using the material for vehicle lanes.
That's great. I was also curious about ways that potentially the city can seize the moment. I know it was really scary at the beginning of the year. I was very pregnant, and it was very scary of like whether or not I could drive to the Mills Peninsula because El Camino was flooded, for instance, right? So that was actually a very real thing for me. And I was just curious, though, if there's ways that, maybe this will happen in the Blue Sky meeting or whatnot to take advantage at the back end now and reflect about, for instance, I think, this is my comment, I think people would be much more amenable to a lagoon fee, knowing that we've experienced this collective issue like in the beginning of the year, right? Everything was theoretical before, potentially outside of the impacted residents in the exact lagoon area. But now the entire city has had this collective experience, and it's scary. And, and along with Azalea, your stormwater fee, right? Like, how do we actually think through learning from this and prioritizing these things? Because they do take money, but we've experienced it now, and we're only going to continue to experience it. So that's my comment wrapped up on the resilience part. Next set of questions. I really appreciate all the bike ped updates that we get from Sue Ellen. I was curious, what is the best way to send feedback to Public Works on the traffic flow challenges that might be experienced by the new bike lanes? Specifically, I have two anecdotes to share. One is at the 3rd Street Humboldt intersection, right? There's the freeway, there's the brand new, beautiful Humboldt bike lane, and there's like this right turn when you're going south on Humboldt. There's now no right turn allowed on to 3rd from Humboldt, except for bikes, but nobody pays attention to it. And so not only is it not safe for the bikes because they expect the cars to stop, it's not safe for the cars because they're like getting confused about this new no turn on right. And a lot of the ones who comply will have to make like a huge square to get to where they need to go. So like that seems like that could use some like public input. And so is there like a process where the second one is on Pacific, which is where I live, by Pacific and like Steamies, there's a right turn lane when you're going north where it's like there's no bollards. You basically cross into the bike lane into a right turn, and so you could hit a bicyclist if you're not careful. But the one up ahead on Pacific and Hillsdale has beautiful like white vertical strip bollard things, so you're not allowed to turn right there, which is super great. Or actually, where you're not allowed to turn and where you are allowed to turn, which is super great visual cue. So like, I'm happy to take pictures, for instance, or like send an email, but like, is there a cycle of feedback where you plan to get feedback from the community beyond just the parking issue, for instance, but on these traffic flow issues, from these new projects, which we love, but just need a little tweaking?
Yeah, no, you bring up a really important point, and this is something that over the past 2 years specifically, we've been trying to really be better at, right? How do we, there are some things that are requirements or standards that we have to follow. So we actually do get questions on why this, and we do have standards that we need to follow. There's a reason. As it relates to understanding designs, I do think that we need to be able to have that, whether it be virtual in terms of review and also understanding how these designs are intended to work. And if they need, some of the things may need tweaking after. We do see that as well. Design is intended for the public, right? For them to understand. If that is not understood, and either we have to do something else or we need to tweak, we can definitely make changes post, but we definitely need to work on figuring out how to best convey and explain and get feedback on these projects. So that's something that we continue to figure out or assess how to do, because it's been challenging to how can I say this? So we've had community meetings, and it depends on who attends, right, and what lens they're seeing the design through.
Yeah. No, totally. And so I was just curious, like, is it best to, for in the interim, is it best
In the
to send the
interim?
email to the admin team and
Yes.
so that it's at least logged,
That-
but there's not really yet like, oh, we're going to reevaluate the traffic flow in 6 months, or we're going to reevaluate that in 2024. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
we'll be open to tweaks in 2024. You know what I mean? Like, there's not like a calendar for this sort of stuff yet.
There isn't, but that is an ongoing question. How successful are, our designs, and what are we learning from them? So I would say that we welcome that feedback, because we can either explain or go back, and we have an engineering technician whose role it is to go back and see, is this working? So there is that process. And so our Public Works email is the best way, because we have dedicated staff who then can make sure that that email, that question gets to the right person.
Great, thank you. And then I had a question about like I don't know how to call it, but like small projects. So now that I have to use a stroller again, I'm all the more aware of the lack of curb cutouts in certain corners of sidewalks, for instance. And I was like, oh, well, I'm just using a stroller. What happens if you're in a wheelchair? Like, this is incredibly problematic. So like, does that also go to the email, or is there like a curb cutout? I didn't know where curb cutouts lay in the organizational charts that you're presenting. I was curious, does that fall under your department, or?
The challenge there is that we, as I said before, everything that includes the sidewalk and the planting strip and curb is the responsibility of the property owner, even though it's in the public right-of-way. That being said, however, we do have a database for ADA improvements that we have to make in the public realm. So it is one of those things that we actually assess when we're doing a CIP project, whether it's a roadway resurfacing, that we take a look at the pedestrian realm and assess it from an ADA perspective. So the list is very long, so I would say let us know. I also want to be clear, I feel the modern day challenge for Public Works is the expectations are very high, given the number of miles of assets that we have, the funding, and the staff. So, because you can see the 12 square miles, and that is the challenge. But we welcome your feedback. If we can address it, we will. But at the same time, there's a lot to fix that was built a long time ago.
Yeah, and along those lines with the sidewalk, I wasn't aware of this whole 15-year program for sidewalks, but I'm in the generation of homeowners. I just bought a home here like 2 years ago, right? So I didn't even know that was a thing that was happening. So when that program concludes, is there an anticipation of doing like an outreach and education program for homeowners on this stuff? Because I don't know how to take care of my own sidewalk, and I'm on the commission. Like, so how do we make sure that this doesn't just fall into disrepair after your 15-year effort?
Absolutely. So it is something that Mayor Lee actually brought up during the council meeting in terms of sidewalks. It really depends on the whether they allocate funding to continue this program. It is, it will be up to them, up to the council. But if we do not have funding, and we will have to really make sure that residents know that the responsibility lies with the homeowner.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more questions. The one on data. So loved all the data you presented, and thank you so much on especially the bar charts of all the things that the staff have to handle and intake. That was very interesting. I was curious in next year's presentation if there was any opportunity to also add like example anecdotes of response times. So for instance, like we got this done, we were out in an hour on this kind of a project is easy for us to do. And then, but ADA curb cutouts maybe isn't something that will just not happen sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, so what are the things, like some color there on response times would be really interesting, I think, for next year's presentation if possible. And then my last question is, you have a very ambitious public engagement calendar for 2023, and we saw some really bright spots and some, like rose, thorn, and bud, right? Sort of kind of analogies on terms of public engagement, like last year, right? And so I was curious, from a personnel standpoint and from a capacity building and skills building standpoint, is there any opportunity for staff to continue to learn new ways to do public engagement, stakeholder engagement, community outreach? What are those pathways? Is it mentorship with other cities or with experts and professionals? I want everyone to feel really good when they go, like staff-wise, when they go out into the public, and then I want the public to feel really good also, right? Like that two-way street. So just curious about that more personnel skills building piece, professional development.
Absolutely. So we have actually hired a public outreach firm to help us exactly with that. They are helping us with Bermuda Bridge. They're also helping us with the stormwater fee effort. And we have a different consultant on the Complete Streets. But internally, we have been asking ourselves a lot of the questions that have been raised, through you all, and the lessons learned. So we are in the process of working with public outreach experts who can help us develop more comprehensive strategies. And you will see some of that when we come back to you next month on Complete Streets, because that is a large effort. It is visionary. There's some realities, change. To make headway, right, changes are required. And so we've been very clear with the consultant that we need to be as transparent as possible. It can't just be pretty. We have to walk, what gives, right? Is it the parking? Is it the circulation? So we have been having some very good discussions on how to present that, and we will need your feedback, because I do feel the Complete Streets effort will be different than past efforts.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm done.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the blue sky. I'm a veteran of too many of those, and forgive my cynicism. The staff priorities, which reflect the city priorities, prior councils. We have a relatively new council now. Do you submit your priorities, the staff's priorities, your perception of what should be the council's priorities in writing to them before? Are you just going to present at this Saturday, or how do you convey that?
We do. We are asked for internal priorities, and we do submit those, which we did last week. Awesome.
That makes me feel almost less cynical, because I know what you're going to hear from the public, and I have a family event that I've allowed to keep me from going because I just can't sit still through those anymore. And the one item is going to be the lagoon dredging and all the flooding. I echo the comment from Commissioner Narita. I think now it's going to make more sense going forward. It's going to be better received. I happen, just my own personal view is that it should be a citywide cost, even though I don't live on the lagoon, but the impact is there. There's no way it's going to pass if we're ever get enough money if it's just lagoon neighborhood. A suggestion would be that it's something that comes back to the commission, because if nothing else, we can help with the public outreach.
And it will, yes.
Great, because I know those folks, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way. They'll flood the room, pun intended, and they should. This is a good venue for them to express those feelings, and not just in a 5-hour council meeting or some of your outreach there. Another item that's going to probably come up is the North Central parking, and parking generally. You've already talked about this. Comes up. Complete Streets. It's going to be an issue. So I think you know about that. One that is unlikely to come back up, but I'm just going to mention it. And I apologize, this is my general plan hat as well, the circulation element is 82 El Camino. And I know, it's Caltrans, it's a state entity, but the traffic flow, we saw the accidents on El Camino, but traffic flow impacts the whole city. And it's somehow, I think we're going to ultimately, I think the city's going to have to, it would be wise to bite the bullet, wrestle Caltrans to the ground and try and actually make some improvements there, no left turns, whatever. I know every time you push somewhere on whack-a-mole when it comes to traffic, pops up somewhere else. But that was my input there. And again, just thank y'all. It's great. I may be the oldest person on here in terms of age and time. The age part should be irrelevant, I hope. But everything you've said, I've heard going back for a long time, but I really appreciate how the new staff, no slight on my old friend Brad Underwood, but what y'all have done is fantastic. That was really great hearing that. Anything else, comments or questions that got passed over? Anything other than Susan? No, I'm teasing. Go ahead. Go ahead, Susan. I like to tease you. You always have one. Good one.
And this is my comment. I live next to Laurel Creek. And Laurel Creek is one of the major tributaries that drains into the Marina Lagoon. And my observation is, frankly, the issue at Laurel Creek is man-made. That is, I observed, and Commissioner Rita touched a little bit on this on Pervious Streets, but I saw enormous amounts of water draining out of Hacienda in Winway. In fact, probably from all the surrounding streets into Laurel Creek. So to some degree, we have really created our own problem with the streets being, and I don't know if there's a solution and probably, or even something partial to mitigate the amount of water that enters the creeks through the street system. I'll just leave it at that. It might be a combination of biobases. I frankly was hoping that some of this water would be diverted into that 500-gallon football field size tank, frankly, but that train left years ago. But anyway, just, I think that to me is going to be a blue sky issue I'm going to bring up and a challenge. Part of the reason we are in our position that we are is it's because of impervious streets that drain into roughly about 5 creeks. And that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Well, okay, no, she beat you to it. Go for
Well,
it.
mine's not related. Is yours related? Okay, why don't you go first?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, just to follow up on that again. Looking at the map of our watersheds, some of these creeks actually start outside of San Mateo. So is there any effort to work with maybe other towns like the town of Hillsborough to address these creeks? Because these are what are going into the marina and the bay, to address them at the watershed scale to maybe, there are creek restorations that happen in other parts of the world. There's giving the river a little more room. So are there places where we could maybe find some places or more storage higher up instead of letting it all flow downhill? Why does a raindrop that lands in, at the top of San Mateo have to go all the way down?
We can certainly try.
You're talking about Hillsborough, and you're talking about the San Francisco, the water
Belmont.
authority.
Yeah.
Nothing's impossible, and I'm not staff. I'm just a commissioner. But it's that's tricky. That's tricky. But
It's tricky, but yeah.
yeah, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be tried.
How we build our streets, that's what we have control over.
My question's a little bit related, and this may be the territory of SFPUC or water utility, but through the storm events and so on, has there been more thought about rainwater capturing as reservoir or for drinking water, to put back in the system? Is that talked about or discussed through any at Public Works or other departments?
We have not. I mean, the county has county technically manages our groundwater, right, which is big reservoir. And what we, to Commissioner Rowinski's point, what we can do is build green infrastructure. We can work with private development, which our municipal permit does require, right, a certain percentage of that to be pervious. In terms of looking at something more comprehensively in the sense from a water supply perspective, it really is up to Cal Water and SFPUC. It's not our realm, but what we can do is try to make sure that we work on low impact development and that we build the green infrastructure that we need in our public right of way. Challenging.
Sure.
Sorry, unrelated, but the lagoon question reminded me. So I had a question about the lagoon. There's the $80 million dredging, which is like the big project that has been kicked down the road for generations. But I was curious, if that were actually to be funded somehow, does Public Works have the budget for continued maintenance so that we don't have to kick the can down the road again over and over again? So are we really looking at an $80 million capital outlay and everything else will be covered for generations to come, or is it more than that?
Right. So the current proposal, the stormwater fee of $16 a month, put a $1.9 million a year set aside for dredging. And so that if that fee were to pass, that 1.9 would continue, so there would be dedicated funding for dredging.
And that's for the continued maintenance and not the $80 million outlay, or would it chip away at the $80 million need?
So the 1.9 is based on, it's sort of based on, let's say, 30-year financing of an $80 million project, but with a fee in perpetuity, there would be revenue allocated, past the project to continue dredging.
Got it. And maybe this is for blue sky, because this might be pretty blue sky, but has the city ever considered public-private partnerships to get that funded, or philanthropy, because we have a boatload of billionaires who live in San Mateo, let's be honest, or something like that, because it just seems, I don't know, we can get a little creative here.
So residents have approached us about that. It would really have to be initiated by the residents, just like the library, Friends of the Library, right, Friends of the Lagoon, but it would have to be an effort initiated by private citizens.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
We're coming up at 9 o'clock. Amazing time. Thanks, everybody, on that subject. Now we're down just to notices. Everybody should have gotten the crystal ball. Is there anything else that somebody would like to talk about?
I know we're 2 months into the new year, but I just wanted to express my appreciation for former Commissioner Adam Lorraine, now City Council Member Adam Lorraine. Just given his tenure on the commission, I thought he did a great job when he was chair, and he provided me with a lot of mentorship, so I just wanted to put that in the record, since I think Adam will actually watch these. So to thank now Councilmember Lorraine for all his service on the commission. And he was the one who kind of held down the responsibility of providing events, from the community. So my open call to the community is please email us at our email to send events, and I will try to take up that helm as much as I can with whatever events are sent through our email. Thank you.
Thank you. Any staff reports or announcements?
Just blue sky this Saturday.
Fun. Anybody else? Hearing none. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.